Nature calls to the adventurous, the dreamers, the fearless. For many, the great outdoors is where they feel most alive, scaling peaks, diving into unknown forests, or walking trails carved by time itself. But as beautiful and thrilling as it is, nature doesn't come with guarantees. In fact, when it decides to turn, it can become the most unforgiving force on Earth. In this video, we're diving into 5 of the most horrifying real-life outdoor deaths ever recorded. Stories of people who chased adventure and paid the ultimate price. These aren't legends or urban myths. These are tragic, documented cases that remind everyone. The wild has rules, and it doesn't bend them for anyone. 1. The bivy bag death at Trails, Carolina, February 2024. It started with hope. 12-year-old Clark Harmon had just arrived at Trails, Carolina, a wilderness therapy camp in North Carolina. His parents had sent him there, hoping it would help with his ADHD and anxiety. They believed this place would offer structure, coping tools, and maybe even peace. Clark had traveled all the way from New York, escorted by hired professionals. It was a big shift, and understandably, he was upset at first. But by the time he arrived, he began settling in and followed directions, though he chose not to eat dinner that first night. No one could have guessed that would be his last meal. He was placed in cabin 6 with 4 other boys. The staff-to-student ratio was 1-to-1, and like every new arrival, Clark was placed in a bivy bag, a compact, weather-resistant sleeping system. But these weren't being used for their intended purpose. At Trails, Carolina, bivy bags were being misused as containment tools. If a kid was at risk of running away or having an emotional outburst, they'd be sealed inside. The bivy bag assigned to Clark was already damaged. Its mesh ventilation was torn. Instead of replacing it, the staff sealed its outer layer, opaque, thick, and nearly airtight. As night fell, Clark grew restless. Staff heard him mumbling and shifting around. At one point, they even removed him from the bag to let him sleep outside of it. But later, they zipped him back in and reactivated the alarm system. Throughout the night, staff conducted checks, but because the bivy was fully sealed, they couldn't actually see Clark clearly. They noted minor movement and assumed all was fine. By morning, nothing was fine. Clark was unresponsive. His body was cold. Rigor mortis had set in. His knees were bent, his arms crossed over his chest, and a foamy substance near his mouth revealed the horror. He had suffocated. There were disturbing details, too. His pants and underwear were up near his shoulders, but his hoodie and t-shirt were still on. Emergency responders confirmed he had been dead for hours. The autopsy ruled it a homicide caused by lack of airflow. The camp failed him, not just that night, but in how they responded. Staff withheld information. They refused to give investigators access to the other boys in cabin 6 or their identities. They acted like nothing had gone wrong, but everything had. It wasn't the first tragedy at Trails, Carolina. Back in 2014, another teenager, Alec Lansing, died after disappearing during a hiking trip. His body was found at the bottom of a gorge. Even after being fined over $100,000, the camp kept operating. Former campers have since spoken out, describing the trauma of bivy bags and burrito wraps, where kids were tightly restrained in tarps, unable to breathe or move. One described it as being wrapped in a cocoon. Another said they felt like they were lucky to survive, unlike Clark. After his death, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services shut the camp down. The state revoked its license. A petition demanding permanent closure gained thousands of signatures. Yet even amid all this, Trails, Carolina claimed they found no wrongdoing in their internal investigation. Clark's death wasn't an isolated mistake. It was the result of systemic negligence, and it may finally bring long overdue change to so-called therapeutic wilderness programs that hide behind nature but ignore basic human care. 2. Stephen Otter Olansky, November 2015 to April 2016. To the hiking world, he was a legend. Stephen Olansky, better known by his trail name Otter, wasn't just an experienced hiker. He was a triple crowner, having completed the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. But in November 2015, he attempted a solo winter hike on the CDT through the Colorado-New Mexico border, and it would cost him his life. Otter set off from Cumbres Pass, planning to hike 75 miles south to Ghost Ranch. He packed gear, food for 2 weeks, and trusted his instincts, those instincts built from years on the trail. Before leaving, he even made an agreement with his friend Ben. If he didn't check in within 10 days, Ben should raise the alarm. Confidence was high, maybe too high. Otter underestimated the snow. It was deeper than expected, waist-high in some areas. As he trudged forward, his energy drained faster than he anticipated. His journal entries became more desperate. He admitted he'd made a mistake. He tried turning back but barely made it a mile before collapsing. Still, he fought to survive. The cold wasn't just physical, it was isolating. Days blurred together in white silence. He wrote that the wind sounded like voices, and sometimes he wasn't sure if he was dreaming or awake. His fingers were blackened with frostbite, and his legs could barely carry him from one snowdrift to the next. The trees, once a source of beauty, became shadows that loomed at night. He rationed food carefully, even chewing pine bark just to feel something in his stomach. The metal skis he fashioned cut into his hands, but he kept trying to walk inch by inch. One journal entry read, "If you find this, I want you to know I fought." Despite everything, he still left notes of thanks to friends, to the trail, even to the life he once had. He never blamed nature. He blamed timing. And in his final days, he accepted that this might be where his journey ended. What haunted those who read his journal was not fear, but clarity. He knew he wouldn't make it. He built a shelter, lit a fire, and waited, but the rescue never came. He returned to camp. Frostbite crept in. Starvation set in. He left messages in his journal, hoping Ben would alert authorities. But by the time Ben posted a concern on social media, over 2 weeks had passed. Otter's phone was dead. His GPS failed. His makeshift SOS sign carved into the snow, a small fire at a campground shelter. It all went unnoticed. In a final attempt, he built skis out of metal scraps to move through the snow. It didn't work. By February 2016, Otter was gone. His body was found on April 7th by a fellow hiker at a campsite restroom. Scratched into the door was a haunting message. "Dead CDT hiker inside. Call cops." His journal was recovered nearby, filled with reflections, regrets, and gratitude. He took responsibility for his decisions, but his strength couldn't beat nature this time. Otter's story is painful not because he was unprepared, but because even the best can be brought down by bad timing, poor conditions, and one wrong assumption. He was a trail icon, and he died doing what he loved, but the mountains don't care about reputations. 3. The Chiv Tragedy, January 1973. The cold northern edges of Russia have long held secrets, and in January 1973, one of them was sealed in snow forever. 10 students from the Kuibyshev Aviation Institute set out on a ski expedition in the Kola Peninsula, eager for a break after exams. It was meant to be a Category 2 route, not too extreme for a group of young, well-prepared adventurers. They started from Revda on January 25th. Their plan, reach the village of Kov by the 31st. They never made it. By January 27th, 2 days into the trip, every one of them had died. When rescuers arrived days later, what they found sent chills far deeper than the snow. 5 bodies were discovered near a partially snow-covered tent. One had a frozen hand gripping the tent's edge, like he was trying to claw his way back in. The remaining bodies were found over the next few months, scattered across the plateau. Some tried to flee, others huddled behind rocks. One was discovered months later, alone at the base of a slope. The site itself was unnaturally quiet, almost as if sound had been swallowed by the snow. Rescuers reported a strange sensation in the air, something heavy, something watching. Even their dog teams hesitated near the final camp. Among the personal belongings were notebooks with unfinished entries and film rolls that authorities never released. Rumors swirled about military tests in the region and hidden installations buried beneath the tundra. Some claimed radio interference had been reported in nearby villages the night the group vanished. Strangely, there were no signs of a fire being made, even though they carried supplies to survive cold nights. The group's final positions suggested panic, but not the kind sparked by a snowstorm. Boots were missing, gloves left behind. It looked like they had fled fast, without thinking. One theory even suggested infrasound from the wind could have triggered deep fear and disorientation. But none of it explains everything. The official cause? Hypothermia. But the details? Mysterious. Temperatures had plummeted to minus 28 degrees Celsius with brutal 50 meters per second winds. Conditions were so harsh, even setting up a tent would have been nearly impossible. It's believed the group split, some staying, others attempting to escape. But none made it. The tragedy was quickly compared to the Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959, another Russian hiking expedition where skilled climbers died under strange, unexplained circumstances. And just like Dyatlov, questions lingered. Why did some bodies show signs of panic? Why were personal items and a camera never returned? Why were families denied autopsy details? Why were coffins sealed? In 2019, a relative of one of the victims retraced the expedition's path. He confirmed the extreme weather but also uncovered eerie local tales. Tourists vanishing, hikers running from unseen threats, strange deaths. One group even fled their own campsite in terror. And just when answers seemed close, the investigator himself died in an unrelated dispute, closing the case once more in silence. Whether caused by weather or something more elusive, the Chiv tragedy reminds everyone that even when planning is meticulous, nature, and whatever else might lurk within it, can unravel everything in a single night. 4. The Fatal Fall on Cascade Mountain, October 2022. Daniel and Emma Heritage were living the dream. The young couple from Australia had spent months exploring Canada's rugged Rockies. Married, passionate about climbing, and deeply in love, they were tackling one route after another, always together. On October 5th, 2022, they chose the Mother's Day Buttress, a challenging line on Cascade Mountain in Banff National Park. It wasn't their toughest climb, but it was going to be their last of the season before returning home. Daniel led the way up the steep fifth pitch, a vertical corner crack. It was trickier than expected, but nothing he hadn't done before. He called down to Emma, letting her know the pitch was harder than it looked. She waited for his usual call-out, safe, to let her know it was time to climb. But minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The rope went slack. A section dropped toward her. Emma called out an alarm, and then saw it. Daniel was falling. He tumbled down the face of the mountain, hitting rock after rock, until he landed on a ledge not far from where she stood, silent and motionless. Emma rushed to him. He was unconscious, bleeding, with a head injury too severe for his helmet to protect him. For 90 minutes, she held him, whispered love into his ear, told him she was there. And when he took his final breath, it was in her arms, surrounded by the peaks he adored. Emergency crews reached her, but couldn't save Daniel. And as if the pain wasn't already unbearable, Emma learned that their insurance didn't cover accidental death. Returning Daniel's body to Australia would cost over $50,000. A GoFundMe campaign raised most of it. His mother contributed thousands more. Emma made sure he got home. In 2023, she returned to that mountain, climbed the same route. Above the spot where Daniel fell, there was no loose rock, no obvious mistake. Experts guessed he may have simply slipped, or that the lack of protection after the crack was a fatal assumption. But no one could say for sure. Daniel was more than a climber. He was a kind, joyful, deeply moral person. A best friend, a brother, a loving husband. Emma called him the best person she'd ever known. And though his adventure ended too soon, his story lives on in those he loved, and in the mountains he climbed with passion. 5. Emily Sotelo's Frozen Dream, November 2022. She was almost there. 19-year-old Emily Sotelo had already climbed 40 of New Hampshire's 48 peaks over 4,000 feet. Her goal was to summit the last 8 before her 20th birthday, and she only had days left. On November 20th, 2022, she set out alone from the Lafayette Place trailhead. It was early, 4:30 a.m. She wore light pants, trail running shoes, a jacket, and carried some food, water, and heated gloves. But she didn't have winter hiking essentials. No map, no compass, no extra insulation. Weather in the town looked manageable, but mountain weather doesn't play by town rules. By late morning, the skies turned. Snow began to fall. Wind gusts reached 95 miles per hour. The temperature dropped so low, the wind chill was minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Texts from her mom went unanswered. When Emily didn't return, the search began. But the conditions were brutal. Over 60 people, scent dogs, helicopters, all struggled to navigate the deep snow and whipping winds. Days later, rescuers found her footprints and scattered belongings near a remote stream. Then, on November 23rd, her body was found 3/4 of a mile off trail. It appeared she had gotten lost, tried to find her way, and succumbed to the cold. Emily was a brilliant biochemistry student at Vanderbilt University, a future doctor, a volunteer, a musician, a force of nature in her own right. Her death hit hard, not just because she was so close to her goal, but because she had so much more ahead. Her story sparked discussions across the hiking community. It became a wake-up call about how quickly mountain conditions can turn deadly. Officials urged hikers to always check mountain forecasts, carry emergency gear, and never underestimate the terrain, even when it feels familiar. Emily's parents now hope to create a non-profit in her honor, to educate others and prevent similar tragedies. Her mother called her a shooting star. Bright, passionate, gone too soon. The wilderness isn't evil, it's not cruel, but it is indifferent. Each of these stories, Clark, Otter, the Chiv students, Daniel and Emily, serve as haunting reminders of how thin the line can be between adventure and tragedy. Not one of them set out to die. They set out to live, to grow, to explore. And in doing so, they trusted the world around them. But nature doesn't give second chances. So for every adventurer, every climber, every dreamer drawn to the wild, respect it, prepare for it, and remember those who walked before. Stay safe, stay alive. If this video moved you, helped you learn something new, or made you think twice before heading into the wild unprepared, subscribe for more real-life stories, drop a like, and share this with someone who needs to see it. New content drops weekly. Hit that bell so you never miss a true story that matters.